Welcome to the Houdini HOULY Challenge Series. So, SideFX is holding a challenge where artists create a piece per day based on a daily topic every day for the month of July. I have decided to take on the challenge and also record and edit all of my work so that you get to see the process behind it. I'm doing this because I like a good challenge. So, let's get into it. Right, day 27 was translucent. So, for the first time in a long time, this one made top 3, I think. Yeah. Oh, this one was the one where that guy made the beer entry. That was wild. That beer entry was insane. He won best artwork for that one, I believe. So yeah, that day translucent came second and then his one came first. So I'm going to show you what I made for translucent. Went for a bit more of a comical kind of Pixar style. So I'll show you that. Right. So here we are. We have Blob over here, your boy Blobby. And what he does is he looks at this glowing sphere and he eats it, right? So the main thing behind this blob is really just the rig. I'm not going to go through the rig too much because rigging is a lot like modeling in that it's much of the same. So I'll just show you what I have over here. Cool thing is I have some hip IKs, torso IKs, and chest IKs so that I can move them independently. And he kind of just does a little jig, right? Same thing for torso and hip. So the rig is pretty nice. Like it has some IK controls, which are always nice. And then it's got these independent head controls so that if I want, I can independently move each part, so the jaw as well. And then there's separate parts of the mouth. So if you want to move up a single side of the mouth, you can. You can move up the other side, and all of a sudden he's smiling, I guess, if you can call it that. Look at him smiling. But yeah, and then also separate controls for the arms. Now, you might notice that there's a bit of extra movement. Once again, this is achieved with either wave or noise, so it's like motion effects stuff that's applied to different controls. So as you can see, he kind of has that slight breathing animation and a very slight movement in his arms. Right, so it looks like he's always breathing, and that's also what's used to give him this sort of bounce when he comes back. That's over here, motion effects. Each one of these is added to different controls. So you can see there's a wave jaw control, and what this does is it makes his mouth move very slightly. It's a bit tough to see in this view, but it's all these little subtleties that kind of sell it. Because if you don't have any of his motion effects, I'll just delete that. You can see that it's very static, right? It's rigid. That movement, and then that movement, and then that movement. You can see exactly what's keyframed, but when you have the motion effects, you know, it adds a lot of small detail to it. So I'd suggest adding motion effects to your rigs. Super simple to add. So let's see, which one could show this off best? Okay, we're gonna do a Shakira blob. So over here, if you just right click on the parameter that you want to add motion effects to, right click on it, motion effects, and then you can go and add any of these. So for this, I would add wave. And then you can see what it does. That's a bit hectic. So decrease the amplitude on it. And how often does it repeat? Yeah, that looks good. So maybe decrease that amplitude a bit more. And all of a sudden, you've got this little Shakira blob, you know? He's busy shaking his hips. And then it switches off at any point where there's no longer a keyframe. So you can see that the last keyframe is here. Motion effects kind of requires that you have keyframes all the way to the end. If you add more keyframes further up, then that would continue. But he only just jiggles for the first bit. Right. So you can add really interesting movement like that just by using the motion effect. You know, play around with motion effects. You can achieve some very organic and comical looks. And really there's a lot of power in it. So give it a go. Yeah, so the other things that make this up is the actual geometry, and of course that has to get captured. So you capture over here with the bone deform, and then, you know, there's additional blend shapes. So there was an issue in that later on in the scene when he looks down, the sphere that's inside him actually kind of sticks through. So the solution was to add a blend shape where you lift up that area, and you use that blend shape and you keyframe it, so that at this point the blend shape pushes his stomach out, so that it no longer does that. So you can use blend shapes after you've decided on the animation to ensure that there's no weird little things that are happening. You can kind of get rid of them. Only other thing is this light that's inside his stomach. This is keyframed by hand, so that's not actually a dynamic thing. That's also just keyframed, so the light switches on and off. And then the only other thing that would make it interesting are these materials. So the blob itself, it's all about subsurf. So you can see over here, there's the transmittance color, absorption scale, scatter scale. Now all of this you tweak to your liking. One thing about scatter coefficient is that it actually works on the opposite color. So if you set it to blue, you actually get like yellowish or orange scattering. So it works on its complementary color, right? So if you had to use red, it would be green. If you had to use green, it would be red. That's how the scatter coefficient works. He's also got a basic noise for bump. And then the ball itself over here is basically like a diamond shader. So it's using that same thing where you do 1.48, 1.49, 1.5 when you use advanced IOR. It's also got some refraction and transmission, basically to make it look a bit more like a sweet or a gem, kind of halfway between those two. So the idea is maybe like a rock candy. So then you also convert all light to this over here, right? So there's a small light inside. You use that as a mesh light. So you create a redshift light and you go over here, change it from area or rectangle to mesh, and then you choose the mesh object. So this adds a light inside. If I were to show you, you can see there it is inside. So yeah, once you render this out, it looks like this. You can see he comes in like this. Post effects, just increasing contrast, adding a bit of glow over there, lifting up the whites a bit, giving it a LUT so that he's a nicer, more saturated green. Same thing with the red. Degrain, and then add grain again. That is something that I don't think I've covered, but when you degrain and re-add grain, there's actually a reason. So when you degrain, it removes noise from noisy areas, right? It doesn't necessarily remove noise from non-noisy areas. So if you take a look, the noise in the background there's nothing really there. But there is some noise in the actual blob. When you degrain, that noise disappears, but the background basically stays the same. So when you re-add grain, it adds it everywhere, right? It's uniform. So I can show you if I increase the amplitude, it's a uniform grain. What that does is it prevents things from looking disjointed. Because if one object has a certain noise pattern and your background has another noise pattern, then it looks like two separate renders, or it just doesn't look as well meshed. And that's just a small thing that you can do. It's hardly noticeable, but it is there. So yeah, that's just a bit of a tip or a trick. So yeah, thanks again for watching. I will see you tomorrow with day 28. I think that was sulky. I might be wrong. Or sulky later. Might be noise. Whatever it is, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching. Bye.